Hey there, and welcome to That Bond Show, a That Nerdy Site show and the internet's #1 James Bond rewatch show hosted by two guys named Logan and Trevor. Probably. Each week we visit a new Bond movie from Dr. No to No Time to Die. I am one of your hosts, Logan Wilkinson, and joining me, as always, is my Phoenix son, Trevor Starkey.
Well, here's to us.
Here's to us indeed. Yes, this week me and Trevor are running through Moonraker, the 11th Bond film released in June 26 of 1979, and one that I have been morbidly curious to revisit. I think I should frame it as. Trevor, do you know anything about Moonraker other than it's the one that Bond goes to space in?
I don't even think I necessarily knew that for sure. I guess, in the back of my mind going into this, I knew that this was the one, made in direct response to Star Wars. And with the name Moonraker, I think I envisioned that, I envisioned that we were going to space, but I thought it was going to be
Like a moon
a
base.
base on the moon kind of thing that he was going to somehow I guess just given the propensity of villains to have evil lairs, I thought, what can be where can they take it next? Oh, they can take it to the moon. And so when the first 2/3 of this movie happen with very little space stuff, I was like, how is this made in response to Star Wars? And then the whole third act, it's like, oh, there it is. That's okay. Now I got it. Now I'm with you. Fair enough.
Yeah, it is sort of surreal watching it now, where it is almost two different films. It is almost literally two films just stitched together like a Frankenstein monster's creation. And we'll definitely get more into that when we get to kind of the recap, but it is a very weird, strange film to watch, unquestionably. But before we get to that, we've got the cast and crew. Coming back for his fourth time as James Bond, we have Roger Moore. It's not in the trivia, but I will note it here. 51 years old, the first ever Bond to be into his 50s at the time of this, and another Bond wouldn't be in his 50s until Daniel Craig, 40 plus years later, and No Time to Die when he is also 51. And there's still 3 more Roger Moore movies left.
Yeah,
by the way.
I was talking to Frank yesterday when we were recording a thing, and my first note, or one of my first notes in this movie was oh, Roger Moore is just suddenly looking his age, and Frank's like, yeah, and you got 3 more movies left. I'm like, oh god.
Yeah.
So he highlighted, or we joked about all of you guys forgetting how sexy Roger Moore was in his first movie in Live and Let Die, and how young he looked, and I'm like, oh yeah, I get it now.
Yeah, it is. He still looks all right here, I think. He looks like he's a middle-aged man now, but a middle-aged man who's in good shape, whatever. But as the next 3 movies go on, that he will just gradually more and become oh, you just look like a dad now, basically, to almost a granddad by the time you're done.
I mean, he already looks a little granddaddy to me in this one.
Yeah, this is him at his best in his 50s. And it is so sudden, because watching him in last week's movie for Spy Who Loved Me, he is so, I think he still looks great in that movie. He's only 2 years difference, but those 2 years came quick, just like with Connery and his few year gap between You'll Live Twice and Diamonds Are Forever. Yeah, so Roger Moore in his 4th Bond movie. We've got Lois Chiles as Holly Goodhead.
I hate that name. I hated that name so much.
There's so much I want to unpack in Moonraker, and so I'm just going to kind of do it as we get to the things. But yeah, I definitely wanted to make mention of Holly Goodhead. Watching it now, I was amazed by how much I think of the innuendo-laden campiness, cheesiness of the Bond movies that I think people kind of identify with, pre-Daniel Craig, are really starting to come full force at this era of Bond now. With Moonraker and the few that are going to follow it, is really where we're kind of hitting peak levels of that. And yeah, Holly Goodhead is a great example. We've got Michael Lansdale as Hugo Drax, Richard Kiel as Jaws. We've got Jeffrey Keane back as Sir Frederick Grey. I told you, you're not going to miss him in the next few movies. We've got Toshiro Suga as Chang. We've got Blanche Ravalik as Dolly, I'm going to go with. I don't speak French, but there's a huge French quota in there because they need to hit a quota since it was filmed in France. We've got Walter Goethel as General Gogol, Desmond Llewellyn as Q, Lois Maxwell as Moneypenny, and Bernard Lee for the final time as M. And then this is directed by Lewis Gilbert in his third and final outing as director. Let's take a look. In the Blast from the Past section, we've got Jimmy Carter is the president and Margaret Thatcher is the PM for the first time. Get used to that name as well.
One term for Jimmy Carter, but at least he had 2 Bonds.
He had 2 movies, unlike Jerry Ford, who only had the one. 1979 was a landmark year in cinema. I was kind of blown away by how many great releases there were, actually, with the release of Alien, Apocalypse Now, Kramer vs. Kramer, and the first entries in both the Star Trek, almost like they were also inspired by Star Wars, and the Muppet film series, all coming out in the same year, and Hollywood legend John Wayne passing away this year as well at 72. Moonraker was the highest grossing movie globally for the year, ultimately taking in over $200 million at the box office, en route to becoming the highest grossing Bond film ever at the time, and would remain the highest grossing film in the series until 1995's GoldenEye. It ultimately ranks 9th all time in the series, and when adjusted for inflation, it moves up 1 spot to 8th. So it is, they definitely banked off the Star Wars bandwagon. It did dividends, at least commercially. And in the What the Beatles Were Doing section, we have Paul McCartney and Wings released their final album together, Back to the Egg, before they came apart disastrously, which we will talk about next week. It is a great disintegration. In the trivia section, save for a few close-ups, the entire sequence of Bond, Jaws, and the pilot falling from the plane were all shot in freefall. There were only 60 to 70 seconds of freefall time before the stunt performers had to pull their parachutes. After factoring in the time needed to get the performers and cameramen into position, only a few seconds of film could be shot per jump. Thus, the entire sequence ended up requiring 88 jumps and took 5 weeks to film just to produce the 2 minutes of footage in the film. Some people really, really, really love this opening sequence, and I'm really curious to hear your thoughts right now, because watching it again now, I was like, it's a fun sequence. It is definitely okay, I think, is sort of my verdict. But I get why people like it, and I also, for me, it is a great foreshadow of the problems of the movie, in particular with Jaws' collapse into the circus tent at the end, and then his little being the image that leads us into the opening credits.
It was, I'm like, I definitely had thoughts on it in terms of, oh, they really like the parachute sequence from the last one, so they're doubling down on a parachute sequence. Cool, okay. It goes on a little too long.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the absurdity of Jaws coming out of nowhere, having been on the plane,
Mm-hmm.
just to like bring him back, and then yeah, the like follow up of, oh, he just crashes into a circus and doesn't and no parachute, and then obviously survives. Like, okay,
Yeah.
so he's just indestructible.
Yeah.
Like, you have just made this a like we talked in Live and Let Die of like, oh, this is the only one that deals with supernatural. No, they've made a Superman in the character of Jaws, apparently, and the only way they're going to be able to get rid of him is to just leave him in space.
Yeah.
Uh,
It is really strange.
but I will say,
I
like,
think
the just to kind of like close the button on my
Mhm.
thoughts on it, the practicality of the effect.
Oh yeah.
There's another thing I talked with Frank about yesterday, because there's skydiving stuff in the Uncharted movie that is obviously a lot more like digital effects and stuff like that. And as somebody who has been skydiving at least like the one time in my life and loved it, it was definitely fun to see them do that, like,
Mm.
in
Mm.
reality, and
Yeah.
seeing how many takes it took to do it after the fact. It's like, okay, yeah, they would definitely have that tightened up by now, I think, and it'd be in a modern movie, if they did it practically, it'd be, if they did this in a Tom Cruise thing, which they've done, I
Mm.
know, I imagine it will take fewer takes, but
Sure.
it was still like, like I appreciated that aspect of it, that they were like really doing it and you can
Yeah.
really get the sense of the free fall. But yeah, the Jaws-ness of it was weird.
Yeah.
And it didn't it it felt more in line with those cold opens where it's like this has nothing to do with the rest of the movie.
It's interesting. That is probably the element I like the most about it, is that like we are just getting Bond at like the tail end of another mission, and we don't need to know what happened, but like here's how it kind of comes to a close. It is Jaws didn't need to be that open at all. He could have just popped up right after Chang dies, and he's like, "Oh, is he available? Yeah, we'll get him," kind of thing, and like onwards, and it'd have been fine. And what they do in terms of making Jaws indestructible in this film is so absurd, right? Because like everything in Spy Who Loved Me is all stuff that he could like he can kill a shark, right? Like like sure he's got metal teeth, that's fine, right? Like nothing's been like that insane for him to survive in the first movie, but here it's like right from the opening seconds we're off to the races with it, and they just get like him crashing the gondola later on too, like they just get more and more outlandish. In terms of like the practicality though, this is easily one of the coolest practical effects in the series, probably like just like the level of you know clearly effort put into it with 88 takes, and also so much that can go wrong obviously when you're skydiving, especially when you're then like trying to perform stunts
Mhm.
and the wind has to cooperate, like everyone's got to fall at the same speed to make the video sync up. Like it is a really 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 cool, impressive, like practical effects scene that like the kind of trivia fact said is ultimately only for 2 minutes of screen time, but it's cool to see them like that dedicated to it. Yeah, so it's a really cool practical effect, but it is a bizarre sequence that I think is very in tone with the rest of the film. um Moonraker was the most expensive Bond film ever produced to that point, with its $30 million budget being nearly as much as the first 8 Bond films combined. It obviously more than made that sum up with its box office take. Though The Spy Who Loved Me ended by promising audiences that James Bond would return in For Your Eyes Only, the massive, to put it mildly, global success of Star Wars led producer Albert R. Broccoli to change tacks and produce Moonraker next instead. For Your Eyes Only would follow up after Moonraker. I also just want to tag on, because I just watched this clip of Cubby Broccoli talking about like some sort of interview like on location at Moonraker's filming, and basically he was like, Moonraker is not science fiction, it's fact, it's science fact, and we are using fact very loosely, I will say, Cubby Broccoli, but sure, it is science fact. Bond fires a gun just a single time in the film, which I didn't check, but I would have to imagine is a record, when he shoots a sniper out of the tree at Drax's estate. Tying into this fact is that this is the only Bond movie in the series in which Bond doesn't use his signature pistol, be it either the Walter PPK or the P99. I just thought that was a super weird fact that, yeah.
I mean, so they're just not counting the dart gun that he
The dart
absolutely
gun
fires
to me
multiple
isn't
times.
a gun. That's more of like a weird, like, I guess because like a gun versus
I mean,
gadget, we're getting
yeah.
into like that kind of stuff. Yeah. That's a solid shout out. This would be the third and final Bond theme sang by Shirley Bassey. It is also, spoiler, it's my least favorite. But it is the last one she would do. I did like the fact that I saw it peaked at like 156 on the chart because she didn't like promote it at all, and it's like, well, that'll do it, yeah. And finally, this is the final film in the series featuring 2 iconic Bond series members, I'll go with. The final film of the series featured production designer Ken Adams and his kind of talents. This is not my favorite of his production designs and sets he kind of created, but there's still some good stuff here. It is also the final appearance of Bernard Lee in the series, who tragically passed away in January of 1981, just before the release of For Your Eyes Only. Out of respect to Lee, the role of M wasn't recast in the making of the film, making it the only Bond film not to feature M. We'll get more into that next week, but I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Bernard Lee in his legacy in the Bond series.
Just one more little trivia thing I saw in there
yeah.
that I wanted to throw out there, and maybe make it like a pseudo quiz kind of thing for you.
Ooh.
was for a while this movie would be tied with the eventual Octopussy and World Is Not Enough for having the most reprised roles of any James Bond film. So this is this is like the first of the most reprised. It has since been kind of surpassed by No Time to Die. And I will say that No Time to Die has 10 reprised roles. Do you want to guess how many / who the reprised roles are of this one?
No Time to Die is a 10. So we're counting. I guess my first question is: does James Bond count as a reprised character?
I mean, actors reprising their roles.
Okay.
So yes, James Bond would count, like Roger Moore.
So Roger
as James Bond, a role he has already
obviously
played.
James.
Yeah.
Bernard Lee is M. Lois Maxwell is Moneypenny. Desmond Llewellyn is Q. General Gogol's in it. Frederick Gray's in it. Jaws is in it, and that might be it. I'm gonna say 7.
That is correct, and you got them all. Yep.
Nice.
I saw that the other day, and I was like going through it. I'm like, who like, because I also got like Gray and Gogol. And I was like, who's the 7th? Oh, Jaws. Jaws is the 7th. Like,
yeah.
It's the one, the first time they've had a henchman come back.
I'm curious what the list will be, and when we get to Octopussy here in a few movies, because Jaws obviously isn't in that.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder who like the 7th person is for that one. It is interesting because this is kind of, I mean, obviously after Connery left, it was like the end of an era in terms of like the core 4 of M, Bond, Q, and Moneypenny. But Moore's been around long enough too where it is kind of like marking that end of, Bernard Lee is no longer going to be M. We're nearing the end of Lois Maxwell's tenure with Moneypenny. It really is just going to be Q, who's going to be around for like 30 plus years, just doing the thing when everyone else is kind of beginning to phase out from that original era. You're also seeing that in stuff, right? Like Lewis Gilbert, right, is like the last of like the old guard directors who directed a Bond movie in the 60s that's going to direct a Bond movie. We're not going to have any more of them. This is the last Ken Adams production. Like Maurice Bender, in terms of like the opening credits, is going to kind of begin to wind down his run with the series. Even John Barry is going to kind of start to wind down his time. So like a lot of those old like stalwarts from like the beginning of the series in the 60s are kind of phasing out now. But let's go to the 0070-second recap. Trevor, I didn't time myself in this one, but it doesn't seem particularly long. So I feel fairly confident I can nail it in 70.
I think it'll be 75.
75, all right. Crack the knuckles, let's go. The opening of You Only Live Twice and The Spy Who Loved Me is copied for a third time. Bond is pushed out of a plane and gets in a great fight for a parachute with Jaws. We cut to Bond being sent to the States to investigate Hugo Drax, a rich billionaire baddie in love with space. Bond meets Corrine and Holly Goodhead, shoots a sniper out of a tree, and heads to Italy. There we meet Dr. Goodhead again. Bond kills Chang in a glass shop and discovers a nerve toxin Drex's scientists are working on. After bringing M and Frederick Gray back to the shop to show them the toxins, Drax reveals the lab has been turned into a ornate stateroom and embarrasses James. James tells M he's going to Rio, meets Goodhead and Jaws again, goes for a boat ride, and wrestles with a snake. Drax reveals his plan is the same as Stromberg's, just with space, and blast off. Bond and Goodhead steal a spaceship and head to the floating city in the stars. Space battles ensue, and then Bond and Goodhead attempt re-entry.
All right, that was actually like 58 seconds. You crushed that one. That was way quicker. I think the third paragraph there I thought was going to trip you up a bit, but no. Yeah. Real rush.
Yeah. Trevor,
yep.
How many people were killed?
Let's see. Pull my notes back up here. I will give you Bond. So overall body count for the film, as with many of these like and battle
Lewis
movies,
Gilbert directed Bond movies, right?
Pretty high, with 81 is the final tally. And that is the unconfirmed and uncounted are there could have been more people on the space station when it exploded,
sure,
but we don't really
100%.
get to see like the full swath of how many of them are. or how many of them like may have escaped or whatever. So it is unknown how many died. And then the Bond count that they give, I will tell you, is 12. But how many of those are like
Named character.
primary or named characters, not just like unnamed henchmen?
Bond. Ooh, it's gonna be some. So, like, I guess my first.
I will
question
give
is,
you right out the gate the sniper in the tree that you mentioned in the recap, not
Yeah.
named, not counted. Like
See,
he is in the 12, but I'm not counting him.
Good to know. My next one is, I don't know if the pilot at the beginning has some like bullshit name of like Captain John kind of thing. So like he's a question mark I have to like deal with. I'm not sure.
No, he is not.
Okay, perfect.
He is Bond fights with the French pilot in midair, grabs his parachute, and kicks him away, causing him to fall to his death. That is, like, it is a kill, but it is not a named kill for this.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Bond book right now too. They literally just have his character named as Pilot, so I'm totally fine that he's got no name. Great. So I'm gonna say Bond doesn't kill Jaws. Obviously, he doesn't kill him with a name. I think until Chang, he kills Hugo Drax. Obviously. Ooh. And then after that, I'm going to say Bond kills two named characters. I'm going to say Chang and Hugo Drax, and that's it.
That is correct, yeah.
There we go.
We have Bond kills the French pilot. Bond shoots the sniper out of the tree. In Venice, Bond throws the knife into the other assassin that kills Franco. Yeah, like the guy in the coffin who pops up, Bond throws him back in the coffin.
That's a great one.
Like kills him in the coffin. Then Bond throws Chang off the clock tower into a piano, and I had a note like as soon as we were in that clock tower, I was like, "Oh, Chang is going out the clock." And then like by the time I finished writing the note, he was thrown out the window. Bond fights the faux paramedic and pushes him into a gurney, causing him to fly out the back of an ambulance and slam into a billboard with heavy force. In the Amazon, during the second boat sequence of the movie, Bond launches some mines, killing 3 hitmen on their boat. He launches a mini torpedo, blowing up another boat with 3 hitmen. He is not counted for the 2 hitmen that die in Jaws's boat, because Jaws is the one who like pulls the steering wheel
pulls the fucking steering wheel off.
So Jaws gets those 2 kills.
Yeah.
And again, miraculously survives. And then I think on the space station he only shoots Drax with the dart, and then shoots him out into space. So that is Bond's kills.
That makes me 8-3 so far on how many Bond kills. I'm pretty happy with that. Trevor, please tell me, what did you think of Moonraker? I'm so excited.
So yeah, like knowing that this was this movie got inserted because of Star Wars, and like Close Encounters of the Third Kind and like then that stuff. I was sitting there for like. I figured it was going to come back into play, given that like the opening sequence is like, oh, people hijacking a shuttle. Also surprised of like it looking like a space shuttle and not some weird, ridiculously over-designed thing. Just like, no, these just look like NASA shuttles.
That didn't exist at the time.
Exactly. Yeah. That had not been like their design had not been finalized. I saw that as well. But then we go on this whole like thing, like we go in the most French looking part of California, clearly. Like and there's definitely a point like I completely missed that like Bond was going to Venice. So like he shows up there and I'm like, wait, did he is this the is this the Venice part of California? What and then they like, because like the glass shop, I'm like, wait, suddenly everything's in Italian and what's going okay, I just missed that. But I'm sitting there for like so much of this movie thinking like, how is this in reference to Star? And then the entire third act, like we get a little bit in like one of the like little montages of here are the gadgets that Q has whipped up, and we see like somebody just straight up shooting a laser gun. I'm like, oh, okay, that's a thing that Q has.
There's some foreshadowing, right.
And then just like when we get them going to space, I'm like, oh, okay, so I guess like that's what will be. Also, freaking wild that James Bond goes to space and then does not do anything like close to that for another 40 years, and still has not gone back to space.
Yeah.
Um,
Don't think he will either. I think,
but then
yeah,
the fact that like, oh, there's also like an American space force that is just ready to like also launch out there and have a straight up laser battle
yeah,
in outside the space station. I was like, okay, this is where we've just completely gone off the fucking rails.
yep, yep,
Like, and earlier in the movie there was also like the keypad being like the chime from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I was like, oh, okay, that's a cute little thing, I guess, sure. But yeah, the whole third act, wild and nonsensical. All of the stuff with Jaws in this, clearly, like, he was clearly a fan favorite.
yeah,
But like, and the idea of him turning face like was funny, but completely unearned, I think, and
yeah,
just ridiculously stupid. Like, I liked Holly in this, but her name is terrible.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And so I will only refer to her as Holly. Because she fits a lot of that same mold of like, just as competent as Bond, and not taking any of his shit until, of course, plot wise she has to and does. But yeah, like, I mean, like my note in the Slack after watching it was, what, like, wow, Moonraker is fucking stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, Moonraker is really fucking stupid. Doesn't mean it's not fun, but it's really fucking stupid. And there was a lot of like, this one had a lot of eye rolling in it. And this is another one that like probably would have been a much better time if I was watching it with you or with friends or something like that, and was kind of just cracking jokes alongside the movie. But I was not, so it did not get the benefit of the doubt that Diamonds Are Forever had. And then yeah, like so much of the rest of it is just like reused beats and moments and plots from like, and to your point in the kind of the intro stuff, like if you took out the space shuttle like opening scene and then like swapped in a different third act, like that would have worked like that would have worked fine. It is just two different movies. It is like most of Act 1 and Act 2 are like your standard Bond thing, and then yeah, instead of going into the ocean or going to Japan in a volcano, we go into space. And it's just like, this is just nonsensically absurd.
I think you like the movie more than I do. I will even tease.
I do not like the movie, and my
No,
placement will show that.
Well, I'm so excited. I think this is definitely the third bad movie I think we've seen, right after Diamonds Are Forever and Man with the Golden Gun. What I was surprised by watching it, because I had always hated the end of this movie. Like I'd never, even as a kid, I'd never liked it, right? Because like, and I was thinking about that again now, watching that, like my like own internal rules of like suspension of disbelief and like what I will and won't accept within like my various series, because I obviously don't have an issue with space. I love it in Star Wars and other series, but like not within certain things. And even as a kid, I just like, this doesn't feel like a James Bond. It feels like it is like a B movie, like schlocky Star Wars knockoff, like added on to the end of a James Bond movie, and it makes it so like jarring, especially once like the space battle happens. But I had always remembered not loving, but being like, this is a fine, like, first two acts. And, like, ultimately, I guess it is. Like, this to me very much rings in the kind of Bond movie that I like the least, which is, like, it is a totally fine and competent Bond movie for most of it. And then I think it gets really bad at the end, but, like, it is never particularly fun, right? Like, I think it does just feel like, and probably because they had to, like, such a quick turnaround on it because they were going to make another movie first, it does feel like it's recycling so many prior beats that we've seen. I mean, it is literally the third movie in the series to have something get stolen by something bigger, and then we're off to that plot point, right? And like, you can just, like you said, recycle volcano layer, underwater base, moon satellite thing now, right? We're just doing like that same beat again. But in particular for me is that like, there are so many story beats I think taken from the movie directly before it, and Spy Who Loved Me. Like there was so many elements of that movie here, even down to like I think Drax is a better villain than Stromberg, if only because we get more of him. But their ultimate plans are fairly similar, except for one wants an underwater city and one wants a city in the sky. They're basically the difference between Bioshock and Bioshock Infinite are playing out here.
Yeah.
And I like it's fine, right? Like I just think it is like totally operating along at like this is fine. This is a competent James Bond movie pace until the end, like really nosedives. And so like I never really was that excited about it. Like arguably for me, the most exciting part of the movie is the pre-credit sequence. And then like after that, the movie never gets like that same level of action. I wrote it down in my notes. This is the 4th consecutive Bond movie to have a boat chase scene.
Yeah. And again, they doubled down and had 2 in this one.
And I think the entire series before this had like 1. And so it's weird that they like really doubled down on boat chase sequences in the Roger Moore era, but they really did. And so it's just like, but like even that boat chase scene felt like, especially like the first one in Venice, felt very much kind of like half-hearted. Like it was super short and it just kind of like ended once he got on. Like I expected them to like have a car waiting for him on land, but they don't. Just like, oh, like all right, he gets away, I guess.
Here's a new gadget. It turns into a hover like a hovercraft kind of thing. Yeah, like I did see
pigeon double take
in the trivia. Oh yeah. Like yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I took that note. Like everybody double takes, even a bird.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just absurd. And I did see in the trivia that it was like, you know, they were limited to like you couldn't go more than like 5 knots in the boat because of like the guidelines and rules in Venice or whatever. So it was like, yeah, it basically had to be a slow motion kind of boat chase, which is maybe why they do the other one as well. But yeah, it was like, yeah, they just really, really love doing these boat chase sequences, and I don't get it. They're never as fun as they think they are. At least they've like learned their lesson of like making them ridiculously too long. Like I'm pretty sure like you combine both of these and you're still probably shorter than any of the prior movies. But yeah, it was like, yeah, it was a lot. I will say like one of the rare moments I liked in this was when they go back to the lab and Drax is basically like covered the whole thing up and you know and made it all disappear so that like Bond and the British intelligence in general kind of look like foolish and ridiculous. I was like, oh, that's a good, you know, like that is the one thing in this one that shows Drax is more competent than you know maybe some of the other villains.
Stromberg, yeah. I actually think Drax is like totally fine, right? Like I don't have any issues with his character. I mean, like his idea to go to space is dumb, but like in terms of like his actual character, like I like him, right? He gets way more screen time.
I mean, yeah,
with Bond.
I joked last week that like Stromberg was basically like Elon Musk, but for the sea, and Drax here is just straight up Elon Musk.
Just straight up Elon Musk. Yeah, I almost put that in like the recap. Like, I think the one thing Drax has going for him is he's probably the Bond villain who spent the most time with a Bond since maybe Charles Gray's Blofeld and Diamonds Are Forever, right? Like, the Roger Moore era hasn't really had a Bond villain really clash with him multiple times, like face to face. And here we get them almost from the beginning of the movie onwards, constantly kind of coming back together again. And I like that because it allows them to kind of build up this like antagonistic chemistry between one another. And I think they play off each other really well. Like I like their scenes together a lot. Like one in particular is the scene where Bond does shoot the sniper from the tree, right? And I thought that's played off really funny.
I guess I like it for that payoff, but the whole rest of that hunt was just like, why are we doing this?
Sure.
I guess it is to set up that moment and to set up the release the hounds moment that he has for the Corrine, his helicopter pilot.
Yeah, I also did like I guess a stronger, but like I found it really funny. Corine's character just like, I'm the pilot. I'm here to pilot you around. It's like, are you gonna give me a tour? No. And then like 20 seconds later, it's like, all right, go get a tour from her to go meet Dr. Goodman. It's like, well, okay, all right, I guess. And then I liked his whole thing, like what I thought was gonna be her moment of right of like Bond kissing her and her kind of being like, "Whoa, like you presume a lot, Mr. Bond," and then making out with him, and it's like, all right, like this is the same beat we had with Goodnight 2 movies ago, where it's like, oh, it's cool, and then oh, okay, not
Yeah.
all the way down to like her, I never learned to read, for the like things her mom said not doing a first date line, right?
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know, should I feel good that you didn't know how to read? Like, that's a weird. In terms of Holly herself, I will say I'm glad we got Barbara Bach in Spy Who Loved Me, right? Because Lois Chiles was originally going to be Anya in that movie. And then basically, like, temporarily quit from acting. And then, like, came back for this, obviously. And so I like Barbara Bach a lot more, I think, while still saying Lois Chiles is probably still the second best Bond like love interest we've had in Roger Moore's run so far, which is not necessarily a high bar when one of them is Goodnight, who is truly terrible. But I like her more than Solitaire, right? Like I like that dynamic a lot. I think of Bond and a woman who can hold her own against him. I think the like reveal of Bond and her in her like hotel room with like him picking up all the gadgets and her kind of like goofy reactions mostly worked for me. Right. And I like their back and forth a lot, especially when they get to Rio, right? Where Bond's like, it's been a little chilly since then. She goes, well, it's been that way since you left in the middle of the night. And I was, yeah, I almost tripped over your luggage on the way out, right? Like they do kind of give it to each other in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
And so like she's good, Drax is good, but then it is just kind of increasing. Like the things I didn't like are Jaws, right? First and foremost, right? This is sort of what I teased last week of like, well, give it a movie. And I was mainly thinking of like the end and his turn, but even before that, like Jaws is played for way more comedic laughs than he was in Spy Who Loved Me. Where like Spy Who Loved Me, really only like the boulder dropping on his foot was like the only like comedic note, but otherwise he was like a unstoppable killing machine kind of vibe, right? Like you were supposed to be scared of him. And this pretty much immediately says he's kind of a goof. He's kind of a silly joke of a character, and you don't really need to be worried about him.
Yeah, they straight up drop the Tchaikovsky's like Romeo and Juliet like music cue when he meets Dolly after crashing a cable car / gondola, like a second gondola, basically. Just this one's in the air through like the building or whatever. It's just like, okay, this is like, and it's weird to think about it in the context of 1979 because like now that music has been so memeified to be like, hey, here's shorthand for these two people have fallen in love, and you usually see it in like cartoons or something like that.
Sure.
So to see it like here like with Jaws in live action was just like, what? And so I can't place whether or not that was like in on the joke of it or if this helped create that as like a shorthand joke. But yeah, it's bad.
I know that it's all bad. Like I was just thinking too, I hadn't even thought about this, but like because we did it last week, like Jaws kill count where he killed like 7 people in the last movie, right? He had like a really high kill count. And here I don't think Jaws kills anyone actually. Like I don't think he like not kind of the guys he fucking kills in his boat because he's an idiot. Like I don't think he kills a single person in the entire movie.
Yeah, those are the only 2 counted for him.
Yeah, so which is like
because he turns good by the space time.
He turns good and he turns incompetent, right? For like a lot of his like thing, right? And so, and then we get to Dolly, who like I'm sure it's not a surprise to you to learn that like Dolly is one of the least popular Bond characters in the entire film like ography of the series because of what she does to Jaws. And like I think Dolly's fine. I don't hate her like some people do who are fans of the series, but like it's more of just like what like Jaws turning good because he falls in love is fine. I wish we had more than 3 scenes of them together, and I wish we had a single line of dialogue between the 2 of them until the very end. But like that is like a fine reason for him to go good, I guess. But it's none of it's really done well, I think.
I was legitimately surprised to find that she had a name, and that name was Dolly.
Yep.
Because like it is such a like barely there kind of thing. I did see in the trivia that in the original print of the movie, like one of their little bonding things is that she had braces in their introduction scene,
Mhm.
and that like, that works with Jaws' mouth thing. But then they forgot to give her braces for the space station stuff. So like it was a continuity error that they have like since then edited out in that in the movies since. Um and it's like, okay, that's, I guess that gives them a little bit more chemistry or whatever, but it's still, it is a weird,
Love at first sight.
it is a weird
Yeah.
evolution of the Frankenstein's monster and the girl who gives him the flower dynamic.
Yeah.
Just they aged her up and put her in like a very push up kind of revealing Swiss-ish outfit
Outfit. Yeah,
again
I don't know
in
what that is.
Rio de Janeiro.
Rio de Janeiro.
It's like, none of this makes sense. All of this is
Yeah.
stupid.
Yeah.
And what is happening?
Yeah. It is so bizarre. It is such a strange decision. And like obviously like Lewis Gilbert has
I will
talked
say,
in like
though,
the DVD
like,
commentary of like why he made Jaws good, but it's still a dumb reason.
yeah. I will say though, like for the fandom, like don't put that shit on Dolly, the character, for like
Yeah.
turning Jaws good or whatever. Like that is not at all like on that character or that actress or anything. That is just terrible writing.
Writing. It's bad writing. Yeah, exactly. That's
like,
why for me, whenever I see Dolly, I'm always just like, I like it's a cute moment, right? And I like the idea that like Richard Keel's actual wife is Dolly's height, and like that's why, because like originally the producers didn't find it believable, and they were going to recast her to someone who's not so much smaller than him, and he was like, "That's literally my wife's height," and they were like, "Well, that's a pretty good trump card, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, we'll leave it as it is." And so like I think they're cute together in their scenes. They have, I think, actually pretty good chemistry. I just wish we had like more of them. Is it weird to hear Jaws' voice? Every time it is, yes, 100%. It's so strange.
Especially since like one of the trivia things I saw in the last movie, and I'm glad like we didn't come up or whatever, was like that somebody had like written a thing to give Jaws a backstory. And he was mute from the thing that gave him his metal teeth.
Yeah.
So yeah, when he delivers like, well, here's to us at the end, I'm like, oh, he actually does speak. Okay, well, this just makes his entire presence for the last two movies really stupid then. Like he has been able to talk this whole time and just never did.
Right? Yeah.
That's really stupid. Yep, that was a bad decision to make.
Enjoyed the fact that like Jaws and Holly are not in space. I had forgot. Like I was like,
the ship does come back to Earth or whatever.
And they come back down to Earth, right? We found a giant man and a small girl, right? Like landed in the ocean. It's like even then they were like maybe a third movie for Jaws. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's such a weird way for that character to go out on, because like spoiler, this is his last movie, and so. What a weird last image of Jaws, like going good and then like waving at Bond, and all. Yeah, also like, yeah, we could do a whole podcast on just Jaws' character, but yeah, I just had to kind of get my 2 cents in on that weird arc. In terms of the actual final act itself, which I feel like we should kind of delve a little deep into. I don't know about you, but to me it just felt. Almost from like the second they put on this like space outfits in the space station, so B movie, just so like B movie schlocky, like, oh, like this is just sure, like we're gonna do it, and like their own internal logic is like breaking at points, and it's like, don't worry about it, it's fine. Like these people can wear helmets in space, but like James and Holly, they're fine. They don't need to wear helmets ever in space. And it's just like a weird.
I guess it's like it's. They're only wearing the helmets when they're in space. Like in the space station, there's like gravity and life support and stuff like that. So like they write it off. But the people, you definitely want to be wearing a helmet in case something happens and you do get sucked out into space. So yeah, that's silly.
Or if
that
life
they don't.
support stops, right? I also like all the people who are the 2x2 in Noah's Ark, they're just straight up wearing like fucking tights. That's their space outfit. Mm-hmm. Makes me laugh every time.
Yeah,
they apparently ran out of the yellow jumpsuits for them all to wear.
Yeah, like I mean, you calling this B movie? they've all felt like B movies. You just like them better because you like Bond. Like Ken Adams sets are wild and ridiculous, but they still like have a B movie, like this is trying to cover up other elements kind of feel to them, for me at least. So like
Mm.
I wasn't as bothered by that. I thought like it was interesting going from like the temple set design, which felt very much like a Ken
Mm.
Adams thing, to like, you know, the other the space station. I was like, oh, okay, like the space station was clearly designed to be like a big playground for them to play around with, but because they can't actually do like artificial gravity and stuff like that, like they have to like make it very conventional, and they have to kind of like explain that away. And then when, you know, the gravity does go off or whatever, it just turns into everybody like very slow-mo moving around and trying to, and so like
Hmm.
it's it's B movie. They've all been B movie, and it's not great. But like it's I think they like the setting itself like also adds like an extra flair of, I mean, like especially like prior to Star Wars and prior to this, like, you know, like sci-fi was
B movie.
incredibly niche
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like always low budget. So
Hmm.
like seeing the amount of money they put into this to do all that stuff, you know, on the backs of Star Wars as well, like it certainly looks better than like a whole bunch of other things of that era
Sure.
that could have, like all of like from all of the other like Star Wars like knockoff type of things that I've seen, like
Hmm.
this is on the better end of it, and the
Sure.
like actual
In
like they
terms of the
actually put
quality.
resources to it and wanted it to look good. Um but yeah, it like it's so much, everything comes out of nowhere for the third act that you're kind of left being like, wait, so the US had like a separate thing the entire time. Well, where did they get that space shuttle from if they were getting all of the other ones from Drax? And how
Just
did
ready
this
to
whole thing
go.
work
Yeah.
out? Yeah, like how did like what was the point of Drax stealing the shuttle from himself in the opening of the movie? He talks about it having a flaw or whatever, that but that doesn't come back into play at all. So it's like,
Nope.
what? No, you just wanted to have like the opening sequence, somebody stealing a shuttle, and forgot to make it actually a viable reason. Um, and yeah, it's just like
Yeah.
lot of dumb stuff there.
I think it's a
Um,
lot of that for me. Like the movie, especially around like Drax's motivations, felt like it had a lot of like unclear reasons, and so like even like like the throwaway line Bond gives of like, you know, two by two they come on the ark kind of thing, and Holly's like, what? And he goes, the people on like storage, right? Like Drax wants to build a mass race, and it's like that just felt like a line because they hadn't explained it well yet, and then like they just like throw that in there for like the audience, and then like I, I did find it funny, like Drax's whole like speech to everyone on the space station, a really weird like if you're like an actual person on that space station, he gives that speech. That's a really weird speech for your boss to give. It is like not like
it's
inspirational. It's not like your mom's like, we're like the dawn of a new era. It's like we're gonna fucking murder everyone and we're just gonna hang out here and your people are gonna look up to me because I'm the god. And it's like, well, okay, that's like an intense.
it also feels like a speech that he would have already told them in recruiting them all. Like
Yeah,
that is a speech for the audience's sake of
yeah.
here's what his real master plan is, more so than like here's something for all of you to know who have already come to space with me.
My
uh
favorite part of it too is that like no one like applauds or cheers or anything. It just like ends and they just start walking away.
yeah,
It's like that's
they
a
go back
really
to work.
weird downbeat.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
it it
okay,
yeah, it is. I mean, it's almost the like Hux in A Force Awakens giving the like straight up
oh
Nazi speech to all the stormtroopers, but at least
yeah,
in that one, like all the stormtroopers are already bought in.
yeah,
Yeah, like there's definitely
yeah,
elements of this movie that obviously this is not how movies work
yeah,
usually, but this one very much feels like they were writing it as they went.
yeah. Which
um
I'm sure there probably was an element of that being the case since they were going to do a different movie before this,
I
right?
mean,
Like
yeah, but
yeah,
like it was very like when I say like they were writing it as they went, they got to the space stuff and were like, oh, we need to actually write the script for this.
Map this out.
That's not, that is not how it worked, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or they shot it in like, in sequential order. Again, not how movies work, but like it feels like that at points of like, oh yeah, they didn't like set up any of this stuff back when he was giving his evil spiel to Bond on Earth, when he was completely happy to like share his evil plan to Bond because he figured Bond was about to die, and then just oh, but actually this was my real evil plan.
Yeah,
I
think
not good.
Moonraker is strange, and it is just disjointed, and it's messy, and it's sloppy, and there are sparks that are, I think, good, right? Like I do think Drax is actually probably in the run for being, along with Kananga, like one of the better Roger Moore era Bond villains, and Holly's probably one of the better Roger Moore like Bond girls. But on the whole, this to me, it smacks so much of that. Like, this is a fine, competent Bond movie for 2/3, and I think it just nosedives. And like watching it now, it's like the last act genuinely might be known for being like my least favorite act of any Bond movie in the entire series, just because it is the most just like, we have just completely gone off the reservation here, guys. Like it wasn't set up great, and then the execution it can't be great because it's Bond in space, right? The only kind of good thing we got out of it is that they largely learned their lesson in terms of going back to space, at least. Trevor, do you have any final thoughts on Moonraker before we go into the final categories?
A few thoughts on the like Bond as an astronaut thing as well.
Oh,
like,
tell me.
So one, I mentioned this to Frank. Like, it would not have worked at all in the context of the movie. And so I don't at all fault them for not doing this. But since Bond tried to be an astronaut back in You Only Live Twice and was found out because he like was carrying the whatever thing onto the ship, I almost wish that like there had been a moment that really would have only paid off for people like us that are watching these movies like week to week, where like when he and Holly went to get on the ship, he had like a thing, was like, I don't need this, to kind of like pay off that little thing. But it is like, oh, he finally gets to go be an astronaut like he almost was in You Only Live Twice. But then the last two things I just want to point out were my notes here. Moonraker 5 shoots the lasers to break up the first two globes, and the use the Force James moment of him switching to manual for that third one was just like, okay, yep, they're just straight up turning him into Luke Skywalker at the end.
The Red 5 one in particular, I was like, holy shit, they just straight up took that from Star Wars. That is just straight up like, they didn't even try on that one.
Well, they don't say Red 5, but
they say like Red something.
No. When the ship is coming in, there is like something leader or whatever.
Red leader, yeah.
But it's only that's only one ship. My thing was the fact that they went into Moonraker 5 was the one that they hijack at the end. That was Drax's, as a parallel to Red 5.
They use red leader. I think they use red leader and blue leader are like the different
it might be
leader names. And I was like, just taking some Star Wars guys. Great final shouts. Which takes us, Trevor, to what I'm really curious about, which is Villain's Corner. We'll start with Jaws since he's already on the list.
I mean, I would argue Jaws not ultimately a villain in this movie, so his ranking from last time can just kind of say where it is.
You're Jaws apologist.
I mean, like, he is absolutely stupid in this, but like he's like, because he ends up
villain for 2/3, right?
Yeah. Like, I mean, if we were to do like a Jaws 2.0, he can be down at the bottom of like Dr. No or whatever. But in that regard, like, we've had plenty of those kinds of henchmen that we've not included in these lists. So like I would say like if anything, I like looking at this, I'm like, oh yeah, we could have and maybe should have put like Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd on here somewhere, but
that's 100% right. Yeah, that's totally valid.
But yeah, like ultimately, like the fact that Jaws and Oddjob are the only, like, I guess Red Grant as well, like the henchman level kind of baddies on here are like, oh, like they were the ones I knew because of GoldenEye. So like I'm not surprised that like nobody else is really kind of
Mr.
raised
Win,
to
Mr.
this.
Kid's that's a great one that we
Uh,
definitely screwed up.
I mean, yeah,
They're probably the deadliest henchmen in the entire series, and like that's a great thing to bring up, Mr. Win, Mr. Kid. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like the Jaws-ness of this, bad, absolutely bad. And I like ultimately I don't really care what we do with him in terms of the ranking if we want to combine that with, other stuff. Like I would still, because of his quality from the first movie, I'd still keep him above. I mean, I probably would really only move him down one spot with this to
that's what
below
I would
Odd
do.
Job.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that's fine. I'd still keep him above like Blofeld 1.0 that was in there for just a smattering and loses Bond.
10 minutes. Which takes us to, where do you want to put Hero Drax on the list?
I mean, like, good performance and whatnot. He just seems like such a bland, like they set up Blofeld and made Blofeld such a figure for some of those early Bonds that like these not Blofeld but Blofeld characters, like the last one and like this one, that are just like Stromberg, that are just like rich guys fulfilling a master plan. Like at least with Scaramanga, he wasn't trying to take over the world or whatever. He was just a wealthy, very high paid gun for hire assassin that set his sights on Bond. And Kananga was like a drug lord kind of guy. Like, so this just being like another in the run of multimillionaires who are using their money to shape the world in their image. Like, all billionaires are bad, absolutely. But like he doesn't do anything in particular to really like make an impression on me. Like he's another one I fully expect to have forgotten by the end of this series.
I did realize that we did not rank Stromberg in this. We get to rank 2 villains for the price of 1 here. We also have to put Stromberg on this list as well. So I like Drax more than Stromberg. Do you agree to that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked last week, Stromberg. Like I like Stromberg's lair way better than I like Stromberg or care about Stromberg as a character.
Stromberg to me has the same issues as Dr. No, where he's just like is barely in that movie, and Bond and him don't really meet until like the end. There's like that one scene just be like, hey, no, they know each other already. Don't worry, guys. But like otherwise, it's nothing. I mean, so, like, I would put Stromberg below Rosa Klebb and ahead of Dr. No, probably.
I mean, I would put him below Dr. No, honestly.
Hell
myself.
Yeah, that's what I wanted you to say. Hell yeah. And then Drax,
because Dr. No at least has like the gimmick of A, being the first, and B, his metal hand thing or whatever.
Yeah.
For this one, Drax, I mean, like,
I would put him below Blofeld 3.0 because I like Charles Gray a lot. I like that Blofeld.
Yeah, I can do with that. Like at least the Blofelds have like some kind of character to them.
Yeah.
Whereas this like is just like rich guy, and he gets like one good one over with the whole like, hey, the lab's cleaned up. I don't know what you're talking about kind of thing. But like other than that, he barely hides his evil intentions. Like he straight up has that first meeting with Bond, and then tells Chang to like make him feel pain, which apparently means try and kill him with G-force. Which also that scene was silly and stupid.
Yeah, like that was one thing I definitely noticed. Just being like, he meets Bond and immediately is like, kill this super agent British spy who came here, because that won't raise any alarm bells. Like, murder him, just kill him off. Not even like missing a beat, right? And then like repeatedly after that is just every time they meet, he's trying to kill Bond. Again, like when they go hunting, his game plan is to have someone in the trees shoot Bond dead in front of like not an insignificant amount of witnesses. And it's just like, what is this insane Elon Musk bad guy out here?
Yeah, and that assassin had plenty of opportunity to do that before Bond shot him and failed.
You had to really get the sights you had to keep them, just get the sights just right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that thing was dumb. Also, the I guess like I appreciated the payoff of like them going through the like, hey, here's all this like really expensive glass, and then just wrecking that entire shop.
Yes.
But I in particular I appreciated the like setup of like, here's a sword with a
You
glass
touch.
hilt that Bond then came back and used later on. Very
Oh,
stupid,
see.
and just like I did see in the trivia of like that was the like that scene had like the most sugar glass of any scene ever filmed
Mhm.
up to that point. It's like
Yeah.
that makes sense. A lot of yeah, like for the number of things they crash through, like that ends up being the like live and let die boat chase scene of this one of like,
Mm.
okay, this is going on a little too long and you're just throwing Bond through a little too many glass cases at this point.
It's still 10 minutes shorter than the boat chase scene.
Oh
In
yeah,
Live and
oh
Let
yeah,
Die, so let's get
like
that going for
it
it.
is nowhere near as
Yeah.
egregious as the boat chase,
Yeah.
absolutely. But it's just in that spirit of like, okay,
It's
like
going on a little too long.
this was novel at first, but yeah,
Mhm.
you guys did everything you needed to do with it, and then you kept going.
For me,
Needlessly.
the payoff of that isn't even the sword hilt. It's the like vase where like she puts her hand near it and the alarm goes off, and Bond's gonna throw it and then doesn't, and then
Mhm.
it just gets fucking smashed anyway. Gets me every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is the list. Stromberg is at the bottom now, and Hugo Drax is fifth from the bottom, just ahead of Largo, Rosa Klebb, and Dr. No. Man, we did Rosa Klebb dirty. I like Rosa Klebb. That's just a good list of villains. In terms of the Q Lab, we've got the wrist dart shooter and the hang glider. And we got another patented Roger Moore era. Let's just walk through the Q Lab gadget scenes.
Yeah, I mean the boat plus like the boat takes over the role of the car this time around, because that like
In fact,
it
I don't even
has
know if he
mines.
has a car. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. Because it has the mines, it has the mini torpedo, like whatever. And then there was also the gondola that was very clearly like kitted out. Before we ever get to the like hoverboat sequence of it
It's got
like
an
coming
engine
up
in
on
it,
land or whatever, it
Yeah.
has a whole bunch of other stuff on it, which makes like Franco's death that much more like you didn't need to be there at all. This like this was just a ruse from the guy who is notoriously a terrible spy and tells everybody who he is whenever he meets them. So like what is the secret agent part of like, or what is the secret part of Bond being a secret agent? Why did they need to have like, you know, a authentic looking gondolier? Like what was the point of that other than to have a guy kill him in pretty much the same kind of like, hey, it's a fake funeral as Live and Let Die, you know. Last week we talked about how Spy Who Loved Me did like elements of a lot of these other movies but better. This did elements of so many other movies but worse.
Yeah. It's gonna be really funny. There's a little bit of Spy Who Loved Me taking the Skyfall approach of using like it's subtle and it's like a nice like kind of homage, and this is the Diner of the Day approach of like, hey, remember these other movies? We're gonna remind you of them. I did just suddenly remember a scene I would be remiss if I didn't mention, because I think about it every time I watch Moonraker, which is when Bond does discover the toxins and then just leads to two scientists getting murdered
Yeah.
through his own incompetence, really. Just absolutely fucking killed those two guys.
Oh, also got to give a shout out to Bond remembering that he throws hats again. With when he throws the thing off onto the
little camera zoom in on that. Yeah, so you don't forget it.
I was like, oh hey, that's a thing again. But yes, like my notes, and the gondola just turns into a dumb car because I didn't realize it was a hovercraft at the time, and even a bird does a double take. That was ridiculously stupid. And yeah, where was the Bond kills a pair of scientists by his careless placement of some vials.
Yeah.
So I guess Bond.
murdered them.
I don't think Bond gets credit for killing those two, or did I give him credit for killing those two? But he definitely should get credit in the
killed those two dudes.
in the kill of
That
the
is
kill
his
count.
fault.
Yeah, those two definitely die at his hand.
Trevor.
Yeah, like they're counted as two scientists accidentally poisoned, but no, they're killed by Bond.
I mean, it is an accident, but he still straight up killed those guys. Yeah.
It's you know, manslaughter.
Involuntary manslaughter
instead of murder.
Where do you rank Moonraker on your list?
Oh God, I mean, like on my list, this goes just above Thunderball. Like again, like Thunderball is bad and boring. This is
Mhm.
bad and at least has some stupid funny things that I would chuckle at. Um but so much of the rest of it I'm just like, no, I never need to watch this one again.
Yeah. Yeah. That is an accurate put. I'm a little surprised you put it below Man with the Golden Gun too.
I
Um,
like Christopher Lee more than I like Drax.
yeah,
So like
yeah,
I would rather watch the Christopher Lee stuff again
sure.
versus
The
this.
Hugo
That's
Drax.
just like it's just going to remind me of how stupid this is. Like especially his like continued presence. I'm just going to constantly be thinking about how, oh right, this is going to all end up in space.
Hmm. That's
And he
totally
wants to
fair.
create like a new Adam and Eve society or whatever, and just yep, nope. So yeah, Moonraker, near at the bottom of my list. It's I don't remember if I've been doing grades for all of them, but like it's an F. Like
Mm,
this was a bad
mm.
movie.
I think, yeah. I actually think talking with you has made me drop it a spot on my list. I'm gonna put Moonraker next to last on my list as well, just ahead of Man with the Golden Gun. Um, for basically a lot of the similar reasons. I think it's a mess. I think it is just not put together well. I think it is just, even when it's not stuff I just like actively dislike, which is the final act, I think it's always just fine, right? Like I think it's like a competent movie that doesn't really do anything exceptional. Like there are no great moments that make it like a fun bad movie. And especially with the last taste in my mouth of Diamonds Are Forever being, yeah, it's bad, but like it's a ton of fun and it mostly knows what kind of movie it's trying to be in terms of like a very campy, kind of cheesy movie. And it has kind of the twin appeals of Charles Gray and Mr. Minton was the Kid. Or like, I think I would easily, I would rather watch Diamonds Are Forever ahead of Moonraker. And I also think Diamonds Are Forever is a better movie, right? Like, there is nothing in Diamonds Are Forever as bad as the ending of Moonraker, I think. Um, and I think there is a lot that is more fun than that.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of why it's not below Man with the Golden Gun, I just think Man with the Golden Gun's really bad. I think it's really not good, and I think that I do really like Christopher Lee. He, to me, does suffer a little bit from um, just not getting to interact with Bond nearly as much as I would have wanted him to, because their scenes together is so good. Um, and yeah, Scaramanga is great. He's just a great villain in one of the worst Bond movies. Yeah, so I put this next to last. I think Moonraker, yeah, I mean, in terms of a grade, a ranking, a D minus, right? Right. I think it just keeps its head above water in terms of like not being an F outright, but don't make me think about the last act too long. Which is literally probably going to be my least favorite entire act of a Bond movie we're going to see from this point on out. There's a lot of shit in Spectre I don't like, but it's at least not consistently just 30 minutes straight of it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this is just like all packed in at the end. It's just utterly, it just kind of breaks the, like, for me at least, suspension of disbelief for what a Bond movie should be. Yeah, I have Moonraker next to last.
I will also point out that like following up on our conversation last week of like, oh, like I like Roger Moore more than I like Sean Connery. Like that tipped in this one. It was like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. I mean, like Roger Moore's still in a couple of my favorites, but like
Mhm.
this is like, oh, this is bad enough. Like now he is in two of my worst three and two of your worst three as well. So it's like,
I
yeah.
actually am glad you mentioned that, because I had this thought right after I watched the movie where I immediately thought back to you talking about, like, Connery versus Roger Moore. And I think it's interesting for me, at least, because I think Roger plays a kind of like very like laissez-faire, kind of more laid back and kind of chill, like kind of calm, cool Bond to Connery's, who I think has kind of much more of like a raw energy to him in his best performances. Um, and I think the issue with Roger is that, like, if he's not on it, like if he's not on his A game, that kind of more laid back, and kind of like sarcastic, kind of quippy Bond can kind of seem very indifferent. And I think this is a movie where Roger Moore himself kind of seems indifferent through chunks of it. Like, he is not particularly standout. I think, I think he's fine. Um, And I also think, as a peek behind the curtain, this would be the last movie in the series that Roger Moore will do that he didn't kind of get coaxed back into doing, right? Like the next three movies, he tried to quit after all of them, and just kind of kept getting brought back in it. And I think that's mostly seen in those performances, which I think are much more kind of uneven. Yeah, I think that is sort of what I always felt like with Roger is that if he's not on it, he can just kind of seem indifferent and just kind of like whatever about it. And I think even when Sean Connery isn't at his best, he's still usually Sean Connery. He's still usually like fun at least. And so that is a not insignificant thing for me. But yeah, it is.
I was just gonna say there's also a moment in this one that I feel like I don't see a side of Bond where Bond is shaken like that often. And when he comes out of the G-force thing, he is like so visibly and stays so visibly rattled for so long. And like that is like, I get that it is absolutely true into how anybody who has just experienced and survived a 12G experience or whatever would be like shaken coming out of that. But it's still like, it is not what I expect or am interested in seeing in a Bond. Like it removes his allure and mystique as like, again, he's a terrible spy, but like as an agent, if he is so rattled and stays so rattled for such a prolonged scene, I guess. And I feel like we've gotten a couple of moments like that with Roger Moore of like, we see a fear in his face more so than like normal. And I don't think it's handled with intent. Like it could be a really impactful moment, a la like the end of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, to see like a Bond who is feeling fear and is shaken and like, thrown in a moment, and see how he recovers. And this, we just didn't even really see how he recovers. He just kind of like stumbles off, and we cut to another scene.
That's a really good observation. I think it plays into I think it plays into the kind of Bond Roger Moore is playing. I think again, like my feelings on Roger Moore are well noted in terms of like, I think he's one of the best ambassadors the series has ever had, and is probably one of the nicest people to ever be in a James Bond movie, while also being my next to last least favorite kind of Bond actor, right after only Lazenby is lower than him. I think there's a reason why that's not even true. I think there's a reason why basically no Bond actor has really mimicked that much of Roger Moore's run of Bond. Both because A, I think it's hard to replicate, and B, because I think it doesn't really translate outside of the like particular era it was made in. Versus something like Connery that I think is more universal, something like Dalton that obviously Daniel Craig kind of was inspired by. I think the only real instances outside of Moore's era where I can think of like a Bond being really shaken and like an extended way are, like you said, George Lazenby at the end of On Her Majesty's Service, Daniel Craig in moments in Casino Royale, and then like you could argue maybe like after the Red Grant fight, where like James had just kind of had like his ass kicked a little bit. And he's kind of like a little stumbled there, but even there he recovers, and we get to see him recover. Unlike here where it does just kind of go to blackface and we go to the next scene. It's a very interesting Roger Moore performance, I think. And I'm very curious because the next three movies are some of the movies it's been the longest that I've seen. Because again, I don't typically watch a lot of this run that much. And so I'm very curious to see how Roger Moore, I guess, ages into and I guess / out of Bond in some ways, and how he kind of handles getting older, and the action scenes he's gonna have to be involved in, the fight scenes he's gonna be involved in, how he kind of carries himself. That'll be the thing I'm looking forward to as we go forward from here.
Speaking of carrying himself, and going back to the This is a really rough segue, but I wanted to squeeze this in here because this is more going back to the idea that Bond doesn't really like drive a car in this one. I did have a note
Yeah.
in here that like this movie has a lot of other people driving Bond places moments. The helicopter lady flies him to again the like Venice location
Pseudo
or whatever,
Paris, yeah, right, yeah.
the Paris manor that is built in in Southern California, I guess. But the chauffeur's driving him at the hunt. Franco drives him in Venice, and then Holly
Yeah.
is flying the spaceship because
Yeah.
she's the actual like NASA trained astronaut kind of thing. So just a weird note that I caught throughout the movie.
I do think that's an interesting. Now you're going to make me have my own add on to that. I do think there's something to be said. I was just thinking a lot about the different like Bond actors yesterday when I was going for like a walk, just thinking about James Bond as one does. And
as one Logan Wilkinson does.
Yeah.
Nobody else does that.
And I'm one of a kind. And like the thought I had is that like I think Roger definitely plays the most like high class Bond, I think, in a lot of ways. Like the most one who I think is both in the world, I think, of like high society and also comfortable there, right? I think because Daniel Craig, obviously he's got like the Skyfall manor that we'll get to and everything, and he's from that world in some way, but he also, I think, he loses his parents early on, that all the Bonds technically do, but we only really see with his Bond. And so I think he also kind of resents that upper class wealth a little bit. And Sean Connery, I think his Bond could never accept the fact that Sean Connery was someone who grew up about as far removed from like ritzy London as possible, right? A very rough working class background, right? And Sean Connery himself just kind of has this like rawness to him. I think these rough edges, right? And I think
he was always in those high society scenes out of spite.
Yeah, right. In some ways, I think, right? And he kind of carried that. I think Sean Connery and Daniel Craig that I like. I think those two Bonds in particular kind of carry a chip on their shoulder almost that I think makes their Bonds really fascinating. And I think Roger Moore does not. I think he relishes those scenes of in high society. I think he loves being in a suit and like great like shirts and outfits. I think he mixes so well long hair. Like he's got probably easily the most like easygoing relationship with him and like the Minister of Defense and him, or he's calling him Freddie, right? Like he gets along well with those people in positions of power that I think the other Bonds have kind of a more fractious relationship with. And I think it's kind of interesting to view it through that lens as well. That fits very in, the mix of like the Thatcher England we're in right now. He kind of is perfect for that mold. But it's a very weird take of Bond outside of that, I think. Yes, but that is the movie. Moonraker finished as the next to last movie for both of us. It might end up being actually, now that I'm looking at it might end up being the lowest ranked movie in the entire series because we each liked it so little, right? Whereas Man with the Golden Gun or Thunderball, one of us liked a little bit more than the other. So we shall see as we kind of go on from here. We're in for a weird era as we kind of wind down the Roger Moore run. But that is the show. Thank you for watching. If you like what you saw, you can go over to youtube.com/thatnerdysite where you would already be and hit the subscribe button, like the video, ring the little bell notification so you can get notified when a new video goes live over at youtube.com/thatnerdysite. It is pretty much every day of the week a new video is going live there, whether it is a podcast, whether it is a video-only series like this, or whether it is a Let's Play going live Tuesdays and Thursdays, and sometimes on a Saturday. You can also go over to thatnerdysite.com and check out all the great written content we have over there, all the reviews, features, and podcasts also going up on that site. You can go find Trevor at Trevor J. Starkey on the internet. Trev, anything you want to plug?
Go check out whatever we're talking about on that D Plus show this week. No idea what that will be
Middle of March,
in the timeline of things, but yeah, that D Plus show every Friday on youtube.com/thatnerdysite and podcast services around the globe.
That is a great shout out. It's one of my very favorite shows that we do here. Go check out that D Plus show. You can go find me at Lefty Logie, at Lefty Logie, Logggy on the internet. I will echo that shout out. I will also echo very dated shout outs. All the Trevor just did a Let's Play of Horizon. We've got Cameron's it'd definitely still be ongoing Friday night Dying Lights series as well, going up every Friday night over at youtube.com/thatnerdsight as he plays through Dying Light 2. Cameron's very bad at the game, but it makes it really fun to watch. And then you can also go check out the written review that goes live, for each of these episodes as well. I have a lot of fun kind of delving into some quirks or kind of delving more deeply into thoughts I have on the movies or particular characters. So go check all of that out. You can also go find That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site all across the internet. For myself, for Trevor, for all of us here at That Bond Show, we will return with For Your Eyes Only. For real this time.